So when there's
Mhm.
that misalignment, it's really about helping them, kind of back into, is it a location problem? Is it a talent pool issue? Perhaps it's a expectation of a given role problem, and you can talk through that with them. I always do find that a technical lead is good to have in the room when
Mhm.
you're with that maybe new hiring manager as well, someone who can really speak to what is actually needed versus maybe what's on the dream list.
Welcome to another episode of All in Recruitment podcast by Manatal, where we explore best practices, learnings, and trends with leaders in the recruitment space. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Spotify to stay tuned for our weekly episodes. I'm your host, Lydia, and with us this week is Tyler Briggs from PayPal. Pleasure to have you with us, Tyler. Good evening.
Good evening. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you so much, Lydia.
So tell us about your journey in the tech TA space, Tyler. I think you may have observed some significant changes in this particular vertical or sector in recent years.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, it's kind of all I've ever really worked with in the talent
Mm.
space is tech. So, my focus has always been software dev from AS400s and COBOL, not to date myself too much,
Mhm.
to kind of the more nuanced pieces, all the way into like all the pieces of the software development life cycle. So, I've seen a ton of change, but one
Mm.
thing that's really stayed constant is things like the back end development areas, such as Java, Python, kind of developing since 2014 or so.
Mm.
Um, so the languages have kind of stayed similar, but I would say that the scale of the software development and the tech has just gotten monstrous,
Mm.
if you will, quite a
Mm.
bit. I mean, besides AI, I think the other bigger pieces I've seen come into play, a lot of security, obviously, and like
Yeah.
DevOps or tool building in the software realm. That's
Mhm.
probably the newest ish, if you will, realm of
In
things.
terms of candidate expectations or dealing with candidates or the available candidate pool, have you seen any changes in the TA tech space? It's a global talent acquisition role that you hold, right? So you may be looking at a very broad talent pool.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's one thing that's for sure in tech, there's never enough. There's always a appetite for these talents within all these big companies that we all know about, and of course, all the
Mm.
small companies too. So the talent pool has definitely changed quite a bit. It's grown, but it's grown, I'd say, symbiotically with the needs of
Mm.
the growing companies that we all know again, and back to the small ones too. So now that it's been such a sought after skill set, a lot of people actually have gained the skills. There's been a lot of people entering into the market as software engineers. The downside, though, is that the market has continued to grow and have that appetite. So it's really kind of stayed the same as it always been, extremely limited as far as top talent goes.
Mhm.
And, when you're hitting those talent pools, you're touching a lot of uh, similar type educational backgrounds sometimes. And sometimes you're touching on a
Mm.
lot of similar type, you know, I guess companies, if you will, if you're looking for something very niche. But overall, the education system's actually done a great job
Mm.
internationally, I should say, in producing talent for the companies. But at the end of the day, it's still a tough
Mhm.
one. It's still a tough market out there.
Indeed. And what are some key areas you're focusing on right now? I mean, are there any core technical roles that you're actually responsible for hiring?
Mhm. Yeah, the team I manage, we work
Mm.
on a ton of the back end, full stack, even front end, as well as the engineering management core.
Mm.
So as far as those go, they'll never go away. In fact, the languages are pretty much still the same, if you will. Back end Java, JavaScript
Mm.
front end, and full stack Python. So it's very similar to what we've kind of always seen. But we're really ramping up things at PayPal. There's a lot of growth happening right now
Mhm.
and in all these technical areas, quite honestly.
So how do you, going back to the bread and butter and the sourcing element, right? So how do you find your candidates? Is there a specific strategy or a host of strategies that you think can work when it comes to finding talent in this space?
Yes, you have to use every tool possible because it's so limited.
Mm.
Quite honestly, I think the best thing to do is treat it a bit like an octopus and put all your tentacles out there and touch things. Of course, low hanging fruit, things that you can identify, or I guess should say people you can identify. They already have a signal, whether that be like a referral, previous interview,
Mm,
um, they're at a technical conference. There's always those types of folks. You can always tangent off them into other areas. So you're touching, say a given company or something like that. But the talent sourcing aspect of it has always been a challenge, and it certainly is, especially if you're trying to get talent, possibly to relocate or
mm.
uh, maybe work in a different time zone than they're currently located in as well with a team. So there's always going to be a challenge, and those challenges are quite honestly just part of the game, and
Mm.
it's always going to be there. But yeah, it's a great space to be a part of for sure.
So in your experience, let's speak about technical assessments and the processes involved in it. In your experience, how have these assessments or the processes within these assessments evolved recently?
Yes. So we went from having Leets code to, kind of the phone interview from anywhere, with engineers
Mm,
at your company, to using a combination of the both to
mm,
a hacker rank and now you have things like third parties, such as like a company like Carrot that does phone interviews or assessments of your candidate pool
mm.
prior to on-site. So the assessments have changed so much over the years. It went from a take-home
Yeah,
to in-person to now we have to worry about
right.
AI, the use of AI during the interviews and those other pieces. So I think it's probably one of the biggest parts that's changed. It's always going to be important, as a if you will, the signal to turn on the candidacy for more investment. And you
Mm,
always want to have like the activation of the candidate be in those early stages. So, I mean, it's always been a super important part, but it's definitely changed a ton. And I think that it's only going to get more and more complicated as we have an international pool of candidates.
mm.
And you also have tools such as AI that potentially could make it so you want to change the way you're asking these questions particularly.
So in terms of handling compensation or benefits when it comes to candidates in that hiring process, how should TA professionals maybe go about negotiating salaries in the kind of competitive market that we're in?
It's really through trust. The best way to navigate this type of market, and really the market that we've always been in tech,
Mm,
is just purely through trust. You want to not show your cards because you don't really have cards to show per se, but you want to tell and educate the candidate on what the vehicles are within the compensation package, how they work,
mm,
the timing of those pieces, so that they know kind of when you're coming to the table what their expectations should sort of look like. And they should give you an earnest answer that way if they understand the compensation philosophy of the company. When you get into now you have competing offers on the table and other
mm,
things that are going to, either muddy the waters, if you will, or make things more interesting depending on who you are. Then you have to think about, okay, what time of year is it? How can we best structure this for them, depending on when bonuses are paid and equities are released. If there's a cliff or not on
mm.
any sort of equity package. So you really want to do that through trust and education, and then hopefully, when you build that trust, if there is a competing offer, they'll share it with you, and you can compete against it. You always want to go with the right move for the company and the right move for the candidate. So if you're trigger
Uh,
points and what they're really looking for, and hopefully you can come to the table with those pieces.
let's move internally now. If there's a situation where there's a significant misalignment, for instance, between a hiring manager and what a hiring manager would expect, and the talent pool or other candidate, or a list of candidates, how do you handle situations like
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, the best thing to do is bring to the table some data to influence,
that? Mm,
and help them understand. Because we can sit there and talk until we're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, our client base in tech is usually that software engineering manager or director who has quite a bit of access to information and is used to processing the splatter chart, if you will, of data
mm,
points. And so it's not a tough sell for them when you come to the table with something like, hey, population of talent pool in a given area, perhaps maybe the population of people who have two given skill sets together, or other things, right? So when there's that misalignment, it's really about helping them, kind of back into, is it a location problem? Is it a talent pool issue? Perhaps it's a expectation of the given role problem, and you can talk through that with them. I always do find that a technical lead is good to have in the room when
Mhm.
you're with that maybe new hiring manager as well, someone who can really speak to what is actually needed versus maybe what's on the dream list,
Mm.
perhaps. So you got to get realistic.
Yeah, in terms of getting these top candidates in, I would imagine, there's a lot of also storytelling of that data, right, to your hiring managers. I mean, bringing raw data to the table is one thing, but being able to contextualize that and really making it a piece of communication to the hiring manager is another. So, what kind of traits should a TA professional have to be able to do that effectively with a hiring manager?
Yeah, it's really that problem solving and analytical mindset. So if you're coming to the table and looking at as this is not a blame game, this is a problem to solve.
Mm.
And through your analysis, you can see lines of green, lines of red, major issues. You can then talk through it. So if you're coming to the table with just like the raw data with the scatter plots, you're right. That's going to be not as clear as telling the story of this is the model that we have in front of us with the talent pool available. This is what we can actually produce and tell that full story. That is
Mm.
pretty handy dandy to be able to pull that. You can easily do it with things like Google Analytics or other tools, but sometimes you have to pull it out of your ATS,
Mm.
and show the ATS mapping and what's actually, what your brand is attracting and where as well. That can also be a good point.
Now, in terms of retaining the top talent that you've got, it's first and foremost, as you said, it's challenging to even find them and then bring them in and have them navigate all the differences within a large organization. So, what strategies do you use to retain top talent once they're hired?
Definitely. So outside of the TA space, so anyone who's not in TA, the methods that we primarily deploy or I've seen deployed quite well and I've done myself would be around getting folks involved right away. If they're top talent, you want to make sure that they're helping you bring other top talent to the table. So
Mm.
things obviously like referrals as well, treating the referrals with that white glove, if you will, or really going to them and being curious after they've started. How are things going? Is there anything I can help you with on my side of things? And then maybe at month in or something, you start talking about referrals, whatever the policy is to at your company around interviewing, waiting to around that time and getting back in touch with folks. So that is one thing. I think it builds more of that community around like one technical family that is
Mm.
trying to drive forward the product. So that's what I can do from the GTA side. Um, as far as also just engaging with engineering managers and understanding what we're hearing from, let's say, the interviewers and what would be more helpful to them as they're executing these interviews for us. It's something that is always going to be tough, is getting interview feedback within an SLA
Mm.
and, getting everyone to, say yes to the invite, within the first 12 hours of having sent it.
Right.
These things will always be kind of an issue. So if you can just handle that with grace, all these things, they're the people who you've brought on, their top talent, they're going to see that grace and they're going to respect it and they're going to want to help perform for you as
Now,
well.
within the company, retaining talent also may involve, I would imagine, also involve working or collaborating with different departments within that HR space, right? Like learning and development or internal communication. So is there a specific way to keep engaging with these departments in order to make sure that the retention is there?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I definitely feel the opportunity is really sits with events, both internally and externally,
Hmm.
going along with folks, to those events and helping them maybe come out of their shell, produce a training that might help them, possibly even bring in referrals. I mean, really, you can do this kind of thing to help them grow themselves, right? And so that also includes introducing them to other pieces of the HR system, or helping them engage with their HR business partner if there was something needed, possibly compensation issue, locational issue, so anything like that. Solving those problems, helping them solve those problems from the internal stance is great. But where I see a ton of benefit really is that event engagement, being able to hear a common message, discuss it, and understand it together. That to me is a beautiful thing, especially from the technical point of view, because I absolutely love this stuff. But that's also me. But yeah, it really doesn't. It should never stop. It should always be a symbiotic relationship between TA and all other parts of the business. Quite honestly.
Now, you've had extensive experience in the tech talent space, right? So, what advice would you give someone who is starting out in this particular vertical today, Tyler?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to think about entering into this space, but the good news is tech is everything and it's everywhere. So anywhere you get into recruitment these days, I feel like tech is a part of it at some point in time. Again, back to what we were talking about just slightly earlier, though, having that problem solving analytical mindset. When you're getting into tech recruitment, you're dealing with um, obviously things that are a little ambiguous. So looking at it again as a fun problem to solve and analytically designing your thought process so you can speak intelligently to it around candidates, hiring managers, interviewers. That's the number one thing I think is still that analytical and problem solving mindset.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tyler, for all these insights and also for your time today. And for those who are listening in, who want to connect with you and who want to find out a little bit more about you, maybe where can they connect with you?
The best place to connect with me is honestly LinkedIn at this point. Yeah. So if you find me on LinkedIn, it's just Tyler Briggs, and I'm currently with PayPal.
All right, great. Thank you again, Tyler. And we have been in conversation with Tyler Briggs from PayPal. Thank you for joining us. And remember to subscribe, stay tuned for more weekly episodes from All in Recruitment.